Modern agriculture relies heavily on pesticides. The U.S. alone applies more than 400 million pounds of it every year. We have fungicides to protect plants from fungal diseases, insecticides to protect them from insects, and herbicides to reduce weeds. A pesticide is a chemical that kills living things, whether they be a fungus, an insect, or a weed. So it's understandable people are fearful that the pesticides applied to the plants we eat might also harm our health. Many of these fears are probably exaggerated though. In this video, I'm going to show you why I believe much of our use of pesticides is a good thing, but I will also demonstrate why some people disagree with me. The purpose here is not to tell you what to think about pesticides, but to help you form your own opinion. First, let me tell you why I have confidence in the safety of our food, even though we apply large amounts of pesticides. I have confidence in the safety of our food because I have confidence in how our government regulates pesticides. And how this regulation works is the first thing you need to know. Pesticide use is regulated by the Environmental Protection Agency, and to determine if a farmer can use a new pesticide, the EPA first studies it to determine its ability to harm us. The main way it does this is by first testing the pesticides out on laboratory animals like mice and rats. And the main question isn't whether a chemical is harmful, but how much of it is harmful. Almost every chemical is harmful in excess, even H2O, whereas many chemicals are not harmful in small amounts. So to determine how much of a pesticide is harmful, we expose laboratory animals to varying levels of the pesticide and then observe the effects of those exposure levels on the animal's health. For example, the EPA will determine what level of exposure kills half the animals. Studies have found, for instance, that if we expose 5,600 milligrams of the herbicide glyphosate to mammals per kilogram of their body weight, about half of those mammals die. This is referred to as the median lethal dose, or LD50. This means that if we have 100 rats, each weigh about 5 kilograms each, and we expose each to about 28,000 milligrams of glyphosate, that is 5,600 milligrams per kilogram times the 5 kilogram weight, about 50 of those 100 rats will die. If they're exposed to less than 28,000 milligrams each, less than 50 will die. And if they're exposed to more than that amount each, more than 50 will die. The LD50 is just a starting point to tell us how potentially harmful a pesticide might be. It allows us to compare the toxicity of a pesticide to other chemicals. For instance, we said the LD50 for glyphosate is about 5,600 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. Well, caffeine is a pesticide too. Coffee trees make caffeine to kill competing plants. When coffee plants die, their leaves fall to the ground, releasing caffeine that makes it hard for other plants to germinate. The caffeine is also toxic to some insects that want to eat its leaves. So caffeine is a pesticide, but most of us consume it on a daily basis. So wouldn't that harm our health? We'll call the LD50 for glyphosate is 5,600 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. Well, the LD50 for caffeine is only 200 milligrams per kilogram. This means it takes far less caffeine to kill a mammal than glyphosate, and that caffeine is about 28 times more toxic than glyphosate. And by the way, the reason I keep using glyphosate as a pesticide example is because it's the most widely used pesticide today. Now, we don't need to worry about overdosing on caffeine from our coffee consumption because there is too little caffeine in your coffee to even approach the harmful level. In fact, if you think about it, every single plant you eat contains some chemicals that are used by the plant as a pesticide. According to American Council on Science and Health, 99.99% of the pesticides we ingest are made by the plants themselves. That we consume between 5,000 and 10,000 different natural pesticides every day, and that cabbage alone contains at least 49 known pesticides. Every plant is a natural chemical-making machine trying to produce chemicals to stop humans, other mammals, insects, fungi, and other living things from competing with it. Look, plants can't run, so chemicals are one of the very few strategies they have to protect themselves. But the reason we can consume all these natural pesticides in our everyday food like lettuce, broccoli, and wheat is because our bodies can handle those natural pesticides at the levels we consume them. Likewise, It is the EPA's job to find out what synthetic, meaning man-made, pesticides are safe for us to consume and at what levels. Here's how it works. Suppose we want to place a limit on the amount of glyphosate a kid ingests. In addition to the LD50 measure from the laboratory experiments, scientists also calculate a No Observable Adverse Effects level, or NOAEL. This is the maximum level of pesticide in which you'd expect to see absolutely no health harms in the animal. Let me give you an example. Suppose experiments show that when you expose lab animals to X milligrams per kilogram of their body weight, they exhibit no health harms. But if the dose exceeds X, they do. Well, if a child responds to pesticides in the same way and the child weighs 30 kilograms, then the child should be able to ingest X times 30 milligrams of the pesticide without exhibiting any harm. Now, of course, a human might not respond to the pesticide the same way that a lab animal does, and we want to be extra safe. So the EPA then sets pesticide regulations to ensure that the child consumes only a small fraction of that NOAEL amount relative to his body weight, with that fraction being anywhere between 1 divided by 100 to 1 divided by 1,000. Let's look at an example. Suppose scientists find that 5-kilogram rats experience no health problems so long as they don't consume more than 0.01 milligrams of a pesticide. This means the NOAEL number is 0.01 divided by 5, which equals 0.002 milligrams per kilogram of the animal's body weight. Well, the corresponding number for a 30-kilogram kid would then be 0.002 times 30 equals 0.06 milligrams of the pesticide. So as long as the human body responds to pesticides in the same way the lab animal does, the kid should be able to consume up to 0.06 milligrams of the pesticide and be fine. But we want to be extra careful, so we set a safety factor between 100 and 1,000. Let's just say it's 100. The EPA would then say the pesticide regulations should be written so that a 30-kilogram human child never ingest more than 0.06 divided by 100, the safety factor, which equals 0.0006 milligrams. Now imagine if the EPA regulated coffee the same way. Well, 1 cup of coffee contains about 95 milligrams of caffeine, and the NOAEL number for caffeine for a 90-kilogram man like me would be about 1,980 milligrams. Then applying a safety factor of 100, the EPA would say that I should not drink more than 1,980 divided by 100, which equals 19.8 milligrams of caffeine per day. That is, they would say I should not drink more than 1/5 of a cup of coffee each day. But I assure you I drink more than that. The EPA is far more risk-averse regarding human health than the average person actually is. So that describes how the EPA measures the toxicity of a pesticide. But they use a similar approach to measure its ability to cause cancer or other ailments, and then they write regulations to ensure that we don't even approach the level of pesticide that will cause cancer. Well, how does the EPA accomplish this? They have strict regulations on when a pesticide can be used, for which crops, how much can be applied at one time, and how often they can be applied. For certain chemicals, you have to have a license to apply it. And there are other restrictions, like restrictions on spraying pesticides close to the harvest date. The EPA accounts for all the different foods which may contain that pesticide, and they also consider the fact that you may be consuming trace amounts of multiple pesticides. Now, when I said earlier that I support the use of pesticides in agriculture, I said that because I understand some of the science behind pesticide regulations, and I believe the government does a good job with both the science and the enforcement of the regulations. But not everyone agrees with me, and they have some good reasons. They just came to some different conclusions than me. Someone with less confidence in the system may ask, how do we really know the science is sound? And that the political appointees running the EPA aren't corrupt, and that farmers are actually abiding by the pesticide regulations. Well, it turns out there are reasons to be skeptical of the regulatory system. Consider the following news stories a person might be exposed to in their life that causes them to fear pesticides. And these are all true stories. Remember mad cow disease? The disease where a malformed protein in beef could not only kill the cow, but people who eat the cow's meat? Well, it turns out that mad cow disease was caused by feeding rendered sheep carcasses to cattle, something scientists once thought was perfectly safe. So if scientists were wrong about the safety of feeding sheep carcasses to cattle, could they be wrong about the safety of pesticides? Science isn't perfect, and we all come to different judgments on just how good it is. Another example, if you read Democracy Now!, you may have seen an article in 2014 where a scientist conducting research on the effects of pesticides on frogs was harassed by a pesticide company because his research showed that the pesticide atrazine harmed frogs. When he found the pesticide affected the gender of the frogs, the company sought to prevent him from publishing results, and they even tried to intimidate him to keep him silent by threatening his family. That's what the story said. Is it true? I don't know. But many people are more likely to believe the story of a university scientist than they are a multinational corporation. Earlier I remarked that pesticide regulations are designed so that farmers do not spray too much. But what if farmers don't abide by the regulations? In 2017, the National Public Radio ran a series of news stories about the use of the pesticide dicamba, where they not only discovered that some farmers were being fined for not abiding by the regulations, but they even interviewed a farmer who admitted he violated the pesticide laws, claiming it was akin to breaking the speed limit. That didn't help the public's confidence in pesticide use. Moreover, some listeners may have been shocked to learn that the penalty for applying more pesticide than you were legally allowed to was only $1,000, when a farmer admitted to reporters that breaking the law might save him $40,000. Well, with fines that low, can we expect most farmers to obey the law? I'm not telling you this to try to scare you. Like I said earlier, despite imperfect scientists and regulators, and despite the fact that some corporations and some farmers will break the law, I believe the system is good enough to provide safe food. We monitor pesticide residues in food, and though a small percentage of foods have pesticide residues above the tolerance level, the vast majority do not. And remember, the tolerance level is at least 100 times smaller than the level that is expected to cause us health harms. You'll occasionally read stories finding pesticide residues in the bodies of humans, even fetuses, but they are typically at very low levels. And remember, most of you contain some amount of caffeine, a pesticide, in your body right now. Although the idea of not consuming any pesticides sounds appealing, we got to consider two things. First, switching to organic food does not mean the absence of pesticides. Organic farmers do use pesticides, sometimes lots of them. It's just that they can only use natural pesticides like copper instead of synthetic pesticides. The toxicity of these natural pesticides is often much higher than synthetic pesticides. The amount they can apply is regulated just like synthetic pesticides though, so the safety of organic food, like conventional food, depends on the effectiveness of the regulatory system. Second, doing away with synthetic pesticides would raise the cost of fruits and vegetables, when fruits and vegetables are the two things we need to be eating more of for better health. We might actually cause more people to have cancer if we raise the cost of fruits and vegetables by banning pesticides. I made this video to help you become better informed about the role of pesticides in agriculture, but by now you might feel even more confused than when the video started. I gave you lots of reasons why I believe pesticide use in ag is safe. I also gave you some legitimate reasons why some people disagree with me. And it all comes down to how well you trust our regulatory system. No one wants too little regulation. No one wants too much. We're trying to find that right balance, and it isn't easy. Almost everyone agrees that finding the right balance is best achieved through science, yet our institutions are run by political appointees who sometimes care more about making campaign donors happy than they are following the scientists. That's why it's so important to let politicians willing to follow the science wherever it leads, even if it doesn't make a particular pesticide company happy. Let me leave you with an example. It's rare for a comedian to discuss pesticide residues in food, but it happened recently. On August 21st, 2018, on the Jim Jeffries Show, the host Jim Jeffries mentioned a study where they found the pesticide glyphosate in boxes of breakfast cereals containing oats.
This week's mortal threat, a complete and balanced breakfast. A new report finds popular breakfast foods and cereals marketed to children contain a weed-killing chemical. Some health experts link that chemical to cancer.
45 samples of products made with conventionally grown oats, and they found glyphosate, the active ingredient in the Monsanto weed killer Roundup, in all but 2.
Why are we surprised?
He then mentioned that Quaker Oats responded by noting that any levels of glyphosate that remain in the cereals are significantly below the limits of the safety standards set by the EPA. And Quaker Oats is probably right.
But of course the companies are denying there's a problem.
In a statement, Quaker said, "We proudly stand by the safety and quality of our Quaker products. Any levels of glyphosate that may remain are significantly below any limits of the safety standards set by the EPA."
Woo! Okay, great. The EPA says it's...
But here's what worries me. The host then went on to say sarcastically, "Great, the EPA says it's safe. You mean the same guys that are trying to bring back asbestos?"
Woo! Okay, great. The EPA says it's safe. You mean the same guys that are trying to bring back asbestos?
You see, the political ponies chosen to run the EPA in the past have all been pretty good, following where the science leads and minimizing the degree to which lobbyists can influence policy. Yet that changed in 2016, where the head of the EPA was widely believed to be anti-science, serving at the behest of lobbyists, and generally corrupt. As a result, we now have wildly popular comedians generating doubt as to the efficacy of our current pesticide regulations. So you can't blame ordinary people for being a bit scared of their food. And so I'll leave you with this parting thought. The science used to measure the effects of pesticides is pretty good. The science can protect us if used properly. The major determinant of whether your food is safe or not is not whether you eat organic, but the political ponies chosen to run our regulatory systems. Think about that next time you're in the grocery store. Think about that till next time you vote.